Hi everyone, and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
So today we're talking a bit about time zones. Do you often have to pay attention to different time zones?
Oh my gosh, do I ever? Well, of course, in Europe and in North America, we have daylight savings time, right? There's a 1 hour difference between the time during the summer and the time in the fall and the winter. So yeah, when I call home, I always have to think, is it 15 hours or 16 hours? Is it 12 hours or I think 13 hours? Yeah, I do have to think about it, and I do get it confused, but luckily with smartphones, you just look on the world clock, and it tells you. But yeah, it is something you have to think about, even when you're not traveling, just when you're calling places on the other side of the world.
Yeah, that's it. I've got either the 7 hours or the 8 hours for the UK, depending on summer or winter.
Right.
When my wife was living in Canada and I was here, I had the Vancouver time always showing on my world clock.
That's good, yeah.
I think I've got a couple of others on there. They kind of come and go. Like if we're traveling in certain places or my family are traveling in certain places, I will kind of have that time up, but then take it off when they're done. So
Right. Also, if you watch football from England,
yes,
you have to be a little bit aware. Some of the evening games are very early in the morning in Taiwan.
Right, yeah. Normally in the summer months, I can see them. They're kind of 10 till midnight for the usual kickoffs, which is not so bad. But 11 till 1 a.m. is a bit more difficult for me to pay attention to.
For sure.
But the cricket starts at 6 o'clock in the evening, so that's a good time.
That's
I can get
nice.
home from work, turn on the radio and listen to some English cricket in the summer if I wish to.
That's true. It would be lunchtime in the late morning in the UK.
Yeah. So where in the world doesn't time exist? Let's find out by reading through today's article.
Reading.
Where in the world doesn't time exist? There are 2 places on Earth where you can be in every time zone at the same time. How can this be possible? Do you know where those places are? Think about it for a while. The answer might surprise you. No matter where we live, time zones affect so much of our lives. However, there's something we rarely think about. Modern time zones are based on 24 vertical lines called lines of longitude that go around Earth. This means there are 24 time zones. Most countries use a single time zone. However, some countries are too big to fit into one time zone. In this case, countries may either choose to use multiple time zones or a single one. For example, in the US, there are 6 different time zones. However, in order to easily communicate with people in other parts of the country, China uses only one. This is interesting because the 2 countries are roughly the same size.
So the article begins, there are 2 places on Earth where you can be in every time zone at the same time.
At the same time?
At once, you're in every time. You are beyond time.
Wow, you're a time traveler.
Kind of, and you're in every time zone. So a zone is a kind of defined area, a particular area which either is or isn't included in a particular, maybe it's a rule, maybe it's a category, something like that. For example, think of parking zones. Sometimes you can park in a place and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can never park there. Sometimes it's only at particular times of the day, like after 6 or before 7 a.m. or something like that. Hospitals have different zones and areas for different types of illnesses, that kind of thing. For example, you could say, "Excuse me, sir, this is a no parking zone, so I'm afraid you can't leave your car here." So in this case, this area, this zone, you can't park your car in it, or you'll get a ticket.
Right, often in front of an airport or a train station, right? They have it. Sometimes it's called the kiss and ride. The kiss and ride zone. You can drop people off, give them a kiss, wave goodbye, and then get back into your car, but you can't park in that zone. It's a drop-off zone. That might be what another name they would give it. How can this be possible? The article asks, how is it possible that you can be in every time zone at the same time? Because, of course, here in Taiwan, no matter where you go, from Taipei to Kaohsiung, from Taichung to Yilan, you are in the same time zone, and only one time zone. But at the beginning of the article, we learned about a place where you can be in all of the time zones. And of course, the world has 24 time zones as we go around the world. 24 hours in a day, so 24 time zones at the same time?
Right. The article then asks, do you know where those places are? We will reveal this in day 2, so have a think. Maybe you'll get the answer before we get to it in day 2 of the article.
That's right, and the article encourages us to give it a good think or think about it. Think about it for a while, so spend some time. Don't just go, I don't know. No, think about it for a while, trying to think of the world and different places in the world you might be. And then it says the answer might surprise you, which also tells us that maybe the answer isn't that easy.
Okay, so we now get into a bit about time zones. The article says, no matter where we live, time zones affect so much of our lives. To affect something means to have an effect on it. Affect is the verb with an A, effect is the noun with an E, and either way we're talking about some kind of influence. If time zones affect our lives, they maybe change our lives a little bit, they kind of control certain parts of it, they almost like create rules that mean our lives have to be lived in a certain way, depending on where we are, who we do business with, where our family lives, and so on. To affect it means to have some kind of influence. For example, this cold and rainy weather is really affecting my mood. It's kind of making me feel a bit less happy. I'm grumpy. I'm not in such a happy place as when the sun is shining.
True. I find I also have no energy. It affects my physical energy as well. Yeah, it causes a change on that. All right, back to the article. However, or but, there's something we rarely think about. That's right. They do affect so much of our lives, but, however, we rarely think about them. How much time in your day do you spend thinking about time zones in particular? Unless you're an airline pilot or something like that who's often traveling between time zones, probably not very much. You think about them quite rarely, and that's what this adverb means. Not very much at all, or not very often at all. This is the adverb we use for things that we do, actions that we take, really only once in a while. You would say, I do that rarely. For example, Winston has a very small kitchen at home, so he rarely cooks. He has a tiny little kitchen. It's difficult for him to even boil a pot of water to make noodles, so he rarely cooks at home. He usually or often buys his food outside in a night market or a store or something like that.
So let's look at time zones. We see that modern time zones are based on 24 vertical lines called lines of longitude that go around Earth. So this is modern time zones. In the past, we would have counted things and time in slightly different ways. But whatever we use, they're based on these 24 vertical lines. If something is based on something, then this identifies the facts, the details, the ideas, whatever that's used to create the concept. So the concept comes first, and this is based on these ideas. These ideas are what give us the sort of rules, give us the ideas, the facts maybe we've observed or ideas we've created that kind of set things out and explain the way things are. And in this case, we're basing the time on this set of lines that go all around Earth.
That's right. And these lines, you can see them on a map or something like that. They are vertical lines. Vertical means going up and down, not side to side, but up and down. So, for example, an elevator is a machine that moves you vertically. We could also use that as an adverb, vertically, or in a vertical fashion, up and down inside a building to go from the lower floors to the higher floors. If we're going across from side to side, left to right, that would be horizontal, horizontal. So vertical, up and down, horizontal, side to side.
And we call these lines the lines of longitude, and they go vertically, so up and down, the adverb form, around the Earth, from the North Pole to the South Pole. Oh, I'll mention those again later. Bit of a clue there. And there are lines that go horizontally. They're called the lines of latitude. I guess they're more important for thinking about climate and temperature.
That's right, the east to west lines. All right, this means there are 24 time zones, as we mentioned earlier. Yeah, again, on a map. These aren't lines, of course, you'll see on the Earth itself. You'll only see them on maps and things like that. But if you look at a map of the time zones, or many maps, in fact, they will have these lines of longitude or longitude, as some people pronounce it. And there are 24 of them going right around the world.
Now, most countries, Taiwan, the UK, both examples, most countries use a single time zone. So single just means one in number. There is only one of this particular thing. So if you say, how many pets have you got? Oh, just a single cat. I've only got one cat. You could also say, I'm single. I'm not dating anyone. I'm not in a relationship. I'm just on my own. I'm one person. I have a single brother. I only have one brother. Here's an example. I think it's going to be a hot day. There isn't a single cloud in the sky. Not one. So most countries have this one time zone and go, that's the time everywhere in the country, no matter where you are, East Coast or West Coast, it's the same time.
All right. However, it says, however, some countries are too big to fit into one time zone. Well, actually, Taiwan's a good example because it's much longer from north to south than it is from east to west. So it fits quite easily between those east-west lines of the lines of longitude, the time zone lines. But other countries that stretch further across the world from east to west, they would be too big to fit into one time zone. If we use this phrasal verb to fit into something, we basically means it is the right size or shape to go into some kind of space or area. If you're packing a bag for a holiday, probably leave your bicycle at home because your bicycle is too big to fit into your suitcase or your bag. So if something fits into something, it is the right shape, the right size, or it's even smaller than the space you're trying to get into. If it's too big to fit into something, well, you're going to have to make some difficult decisions or maybe just leave it behind.
So yeah, we have these countries, some very big countries stretching east to west, the US, Canada, Russia, China, others as well that just are too big to fit into one time zone. And we see in this case, countries may either choose to use multiple time zones or a single one. The transitional phrase in this case means if the circumstances we just mentioned are true, and then the rest of the clause is the consequence or the result of this being true. So in this case, in the case of the countries being too big, then the result is they'll either choose to stick with one or they'll split the country up into multiple ones. That kind of thing. So what do we mean by multiple?
Multiple, more than one. That's basically what it means. When you multiply numbers, you're doing like 2 times 2, 5 times 5. All right, so if you're talking about multiple, basically you just mean more than one. Single would be one, multiple would be more than one.
So we then see an example. For example, in the US, there are 6 different time zones, which I believe is the 4 main ones for the continental US, plus an extra one for Alaska and another one for Hawaii. I think those are the 6. How many has Canada got?
5.5, I believe.
Half?
Yeah, Newfoundland is a half an hour ahead of the Atlantic provinces, which are right on the Atlantic Ocean.
I didn't know there was a half time zone.
So they would all, on television, they would always say the hockey game starts at 9 o'clock, 9:30 in Newfoundland. Or something like that. So yeah, some places do have a half-hour time zone difference. Not many, though. I'm not sure of another place, but I think that's still the case. However, the article continues, in order to easily communicate with people in other parts of the country, China uses only one. So in the US, there are 6. In Canada, I think there are 5.5 or something like that. Russia, I think, might be 11 or 12 because it's so big.
Huge country.
China would probably require 3 or 4 at least, but it says they only use one. Everyone goes by Beijing time. So even if you're out west in Xinjiang or the other further western areas of China, you're still on Beijing time. And that is in order or so that they can easily communicate with people. Does that mean that people in western parts of the country either go to work really early or go to work late?
Yep, that's basically it. I remember talking with somebody about this. They say if you're out there in that part of the country, your day starts at a completely different time.
Wow. So if they go to work at 9 a.m. in China in Beijing, does that mean you go to work at like the sun is just coming up in Xinjiang?
Basically, yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Because you got to be on call if you're talking with somebody, if you're government stuff and you're talking with somebody back in Beijing or Shanghai, then you've got to basically do what they do.
Interesting.
So this is done in order to easily communicate, and we use in order to show that a purpose is being worked toward or something is being accomplished. In this kind of sentence, we put the purpose first and the method used to accomplish it after. For example, in order to buy a house, Bill got a loan from a bank. The purpose is to buy a house. The action is to get a loan. So we put the in order to buy a house first and to get a loan from a bank after. That's if we're starting a sentence with it. We can put the sentence or we can put this transition in the middle as well. Bill got a loan from a bank in order to buy a house, and therefore we put the purpose second and the action first. It all depends on where in order to appears.
All right, so basically you're saying so that you can do something. This allows you to do something. And in this case, they have one time zone in China so that the government can easily communicate with people in other parts of the country. When we communicate, we're exchanging information. That's all you're doing. When you talk to someone, you're telling them things that might be interesting or useful or funny or something like that. Here's one that's a little unusual. Scuba divers use hand signals to communicate underwater. You might have seen that. I think pilots might also use that, right? If they're talking from the airplane to the people on the ground, they might wave flags or use other symbols or signals to communicate, to exchange information.
Yeah, those little pads with the lights on that they can see in the dark.
There's lollipops or something, popsicles or something they're called.
Yeah. So now this is an interesting idea, China only having one and the US having 6. And we say this is interesting because the two countries are roughly the same size. Roughly means approximately, about. They're not exactly the same. We're not going to kind of measure everything here, but we'll just take a look and go, yeah, they're roughly the same. There's a difference, but it's not such a big difference to worry about when we're making this kind of comparison. You could look at a class of students. How many students are in there? Roughly 20. So they could be anywhere from like 17 to 23, but roughly 20 without exactly counting them. Here's another example. The population of the USA is roughly 330 million people. If we did a proper count, we'd find the exact number, but just for a rough guess, 330 million is about right. So that is the end of the first day of the article. We've learned what time zones are. In day 2, we'll go to these places where you're in every time zone. A crazy idea and how that actually works in a practical way. But before that, we're going to go to today's For You chat question.
For You chat.
So our question relates to China. It says China has only one time zone. Are there any bad things about this? And talk about them. So how could this be a problem if you're in China and you have to run everything on Beijing time?
Well, yeah, as we mentioned, I guess the further away you live from Beijing, and of course that's quite far in the east side of the country, if you were over on the opposite west side, you would have to wake up really early. I mean, it would still say 9 o'clock on your clock when you got to work or school or whatever, but of course the sun would just be going up because it might actually be 5 or 6 in the morning if you were really in a different time zone. So it would still feel early. I just don't kind of understand how that would work. Exactly.
I wonder if the farmers in the more rural regions out in the West just kind of ignore this.
Yes.
And the sun's up, we're getting up, it's dark, we're going to bed.
That's right. They get up early anyways. True. I guess it would be good for travelers, though, because no matter where you go in the country, you don't have... What's the local time?
Yeah.
You don't have to adjust your watch or anything like that. Of course, I think these days cell phones usually change automatically, don't they? But if you wear an old-style watch or something or an alarm clock, you might have to change it. But in China, you don't, so I guess that's a good thing. But yeah, I think they did it back in the old days because, the country was kind of broken up before the revolution and all that, and they wanted to make it sort of one country, one time zone, and people, of course, didn't travel or communicate over huge distances like they do easily today. So it might be interesting to, just pay attention, see if China changes that policy in the next little while, because you could imagine it causes some problems.
Well, that's all we got time for today. Join us again tomorrow and we'll learn where in the world time doesn't exist. See you then. Bye for now.
Vocabulary Review.
Zone. Some stores have special zones for new items so that customers will easily see them. Affect. The loud traffic outside her window affected Betty's sleep, and she felt very tired the next day. Rarely. Gina rarely cooks at home. She prefers to go out to eat. Single. There isn't even a single tree left on that hill. They have all been cut down. Communicate. We usually communicate with our other office in Taichung by phone. Roughly. I think roughly 20 people are coming on the class trip, but I'll check the exact number.
智慧小补帖
Vertical. Longitude. Multiple.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net